Welcome to this video. This is another episode of Chess Giants, the series that shows great games, instructive games, beautiful games from the past. And it is also meant to introduce players to you. In a way, very often the players are very well known, so it's not like, oh, I've never seen a game of, in this case, Botvinnik's before, so good to see one. But still, it's good to look at those all-time classic games and see what we can learn from them even nowadays. I mean, this game is from 1936, so quite old, and still 12 years before Botvinnik actually became world champion. He already was a top player at the time. This was from the Nottingham tournament. His opponent is Vidmar. Back then, a top player. It's difficult for those old times to really appreciate how strong a player was, because they didn't really have, like we have today, a rating system. But Vidmar certainly was among the top 10, 20 players in the world. He was from, now it gets tricky politically. He was born in Ljubljana, nowadays Slovenia, but during his life, this part of Europe has undergone many changes, from being Slovenia to Yugoslavia to Austria, Hungarian Empire, and so on. So he was a really good player. Let's see what happens in this game. Botvinnik opens with c4. He regularly played d4, c4, knight f3, the closed games. Very rarely did he open e4. It happened, but not very often. e6, knight f3, d5, d4, knight f6. So we get a queen's gambit, a classical queen's gambit. Now Vidmar plays knight bd7, and we need to remember this is 1936, and this is only a couple of years after the World Championship match between Alekhine and Capablanca, where they had this position on the board in almost all of their games. Back then, they believed that knight bd7 is the way to play, and the queen's gambit declined. It's still a playable move, of course. Nowadays, the main focus is on h6, bishop h4, and then either the Lasker variation, as you recognize the Lasker variation. It was even in existence back then, very solid up to this day. Or the, after bishop h4, black can also play b6, the Tartakova variation, or Tartakova-Makagonov-Bondarevsky TMB variation, as it is often called among the Russian players, I believe. Tartakova, also a player of the time. So these variations were starting to develop at the time, but still the absolute main move was knight bd7, and played here. It is a bit less flexible than the other continuations. Botvinnik now played bishop d3, which is a bit uncommon nowadays. However, Botvinnik didn't mind to play this move, as it usually leads to isolated queen pawn positions. And Botvinnik always liked to play the IQP positions, especially from the white side, where very often, compared to some black IQP positions, you have more active development. Why does it lead to IQP positions often? We will see in the game. I just want to show one thing, that the main move here is actually rook c1. Even was at the time, it was the main move. And after that, black very often played c6, introducing the Capablanca variation at the time, developed by Capablanca. An interesting thing is that nowadays, after rook c1, black players sometimes opt for the capture, and after bishop c4, they go a6, intending to push b5, later bishop b7 and c5, to get a healthy development in the style of the Marin variation. However, white normally goes a4 here to prevent that, and after c5 castles, we get this position. This is a modern theoretical position, not something that you see that often, but it is played by grandmasters. It's important to keep this position in mind to compare it to the game. Here white basically has an extra tempo with rook c1, and he has captured in one move on c4. If we look at the game continuation, yeah, Botvinnik playing bishop d3. Now what black could have done, he didn't play that, but what he could have done is he could have taken and play a6. This is probably the way a modern grandmaster would approach the position. The idea is that you basically are tempo up on the variation that I have shown before. Again, black wants to go b5 and c5, and if he manages to do that, he will have solved his main problem. The bishop c8 will get a good job on b7. So a4 is played, and now after c5 castles, we have exactly the same position as before, but white is lacking the rook c1 move, which probably is a useful move. It's a half open file, possibly an open file after c takes, e takes d4. So this is probably what black should do. A possible continuation is something like that. Yeah, and black will put the bishop on c6. It's very important to note that with a4, white has weakened his queen side. This is helpful for various counterplays. For example, if we imagine a position, I just put it on the board, like rook e1, bishop d7, just imagine a position like that. Here, black might have moves like that. All of a sudden, using this unprotected bishop, attacking b2, or putting a piece on b4, which is also weakened square. So this insertion of a6 and a4 has helped black quite considerably. In the game, Vidmar, however, if we go back, he did not take, he played c5 immediately. After castles, he now went for the IQP position. So this all is similar, but the difference is with the other move order there was a6, a4 inserted. If black now plays a6, we are not obliged to play a4, not at all. We can simply retreat after b5 and just play for d5. For example, we can do this voluntary retreat, and if now b5 is coming, there is d5 being a typical motif, breaking in the center. White is not forced to play a4. I think that Vidmar's move order is really not very precise, but this is pretty much modern day thinking. Back then, they were just going to the IQP and started to blockade it. Those little differences, these subtle points, they were not really well known back then. However, what we see in this game, this is from 1936, is really pioneering work on the IQP play by Botvinnik. Of course, those positions were known, but people were still a bit in doubt if the IQP could be a good thing to have. It was still sort of the effect that Steinitz had on chess. He of course introduced the first basic positional ideas, but he was very much in favor of combating the IQP and not playing with it. He won instructive games, for instance, in his match against Sukatort in the 1880s. So people were still a little bit in doubt. I mean, Tarrasch was a big fan of the IQP, of course, but people didn't really, at the time, they couldn't really figure out, is this a good thing? What is this? And Botvinnik was pretty much taking the side of the IQP and showing the kind of attacking possibility this brings. So black played bishop d7, queen d3, and knight b d5. Classical blockading strategy on the d5 square. Knight e5, bishop c6. This type of setup was known back then from the games of Steinitz, and it was believed to be okay for black. Black's position, in fact, is probably okay, but it is not the best that he could go for. If we just compare this position and insert the moves a4 and a6, which was possible to get for black, this is just much better. A move like queen b6 gains in strength. So what is the continuation here for white? Botvinnik now plays a simple but strong move. he plays rook a d1. Yeah, this might look a bit mysterious. Why would you put the rook behind the pawn? Yeah, this has two reasons. One reason is, and this is a pretty simple one, it lends protection to the pawn, especially considering that white wants to move the queen away. Where to? We will see quite shortly. The other reason why rook on the d file behind the pawn might be useful is the d4 d5 break. Very often this break can play a useful role. At the moment, of course, d5 is very securely protected. But if the knight moves away from d5, d4, d5, the d4, d5 push can become an idea. Yeah, black now went knight b4. And I think this is questionable. Probably playable, but questionable. I guess rook c8 should be preferred. Just getting this piece into play, possibly using it on the c file. What I don't like about knight b4 in comparison is that it gets a piece away from the center and loses some time in a way to provoke something that white wanted to do anyway. Queen h3. Yeah, white to h3. h3 is an excellent square for the queen in this structure because of two reasons, or even three reasons if you want. One is it puts pressure on e6. This combined pressure is very useful. This is also reaching all the way to f7, of course. So knight f7 is a typical way to proceed here. Something that black definitely must attend to. Another reason why the queen is good on h3 is it looks at h7. So if white gets a bishop to c2, at the moment this is protected by the knight, but if he gets a bishop here, there is this mate threat coming on h7, combined with this pressure on the knight. This is very dangerous. And the third thing, if black decides to push away the bishop with h6, we might have the sacrifice. So the queen is very well placed on h3, supporting the upcoming attack. Black now played bishop d5. What we can look at is, what about h6 if black tries to kick this bishop away? In fact, and this is I think a bit remarkable, here already the sacrifice on h6 is working and winning. It's not even interesting or an attack or something, it is winning. White is winning here because of the threat a3 pushing the knight away. Yeah, and then rook d3. This is another point behind rook d1. The rook on d1 is always able to get in this rook lift. With a knight on d5, you cannot really lift via e3 or c3, but via d3 you can. Only now it is protected on d3, the square, by the knight. But white's plan is simply a3, rook d3, and black has absolutely no defense against that. Yeah, for example, if we let's say look at this knight f d5, it's really not mattering. They all win. Here white can take, bishop takes, and a3. Yeah, and now this knight is attacked, and once it moves or gets taken, rook d3, g3 is totally devastating. There is no defense here, absolutely none. Or let's say a5, a3. Yeah, it's the same business. You take, and at the end there's rook d3, g3, and black gets totally killed here on the king. So a very dangerous attack. h6 is not possible. So what about g6? Can you play g6 to sort of bolster your defenses? You cannot. This bishop h6, rook e8, and boof, bishop e6, and white wins. Yeah, this is the strength of those combined pieces. Yeah, here we see that. Yeah, white is just winning the house. So a very dangerous attack is brewing. Black must be very careful here in his defense. Yeah, what is the best defense? Not quite sure. What he was playing is probably not that bad. I actually prefer to play knight b2 d5, which looks kind of sick because you just have gone to b4. But maybe it's still the best defense to try to get more pieces to the defense. Of course, he didn't do that. It's really not the kind of move you play. You move first, yeah, knight to b4 and then back. But okay, he went bishop d5. Yeah, trying to reduce this pressure. Okay, Botvinnik took on d5, gaining the bishop pair in the process. The next move now definitely is a mistake. I think what black needed to do is to take on d5 now with the f knight. The thing that black should try to achieve is to trade pieces to reduce the attacking potential. And here white has a choice. He has two interesting moves. He can take on e7 just for the sake of tempo, so that after queen takes, we immediately can go f4, intending f5. This f-pawn battering ram that opens up this diagonal will be seen in the game. But in comparison, it is less effective. And you'll see in the game why it is even stronger there. Here white definitely enjoys an advantage. But this is still a defensible position. It's uncomfortable, but defensible. The big problem is that white simply has all pieces in active attacking positions, and black is just a bit passive. However, white also can consider this move, which is not as, let's say, it's not as quick and fluent like bishop e7, f4, but it keeps the two bishops and still intends f4, f5. This has the added advantage that it keeps those sacrificial possibilities like bishop h6 in the air. Interesting choice. Both seems okay. But I think black needed to do that. He had to go knight f to d5. He went to capture with the b knight. So here knight b takes d5 was played. And now the next move is pretty much something that you probably expect when you have seen the idea earlier, f4. Yeah, and this is just very, very strong. White is using all his forces. The rook on f1 all of a sudden is developed, basically, by playing f4. This is something that people often forget. With pawn pushes, you can sometimes develop your rooks on squares where they actually already are sitting. Yeah, like you can sometimes just push h4 to play rook h3 using the rook on the initial square. Or here you can use the f-pawn to get this battering ram up the board with f5, opening up the position also for the rook. All white's pieces are participating in the attack. And the big problem is that after f5, black has a hard time to not take on f5. And after that, this whole construction with the pressure on f7, on e6, and on those pieces on d5 and f6, this whole construction will fall apart. Black here really has no defense. If he goes g6, for example, he didn't play that, but if he goes g6 to try to block this, this is nothing that really is too worrisome. White can just play bishop h6, rook e8, and again f5. What a smashing attack. If black now takes on f5, we just play here, oops, here, and black will be mated or lose the house. So not possible. And if he takes with the e-pawn, this is not very worrisome as well. We just take it. Yeah, it's the same thing. Black captures queen g3 is totally deadly. It's no defense whatsoever. And here the pressure is just piling up. For example, if black plays queen c8, hoping that a rook move, a rook retreat, will lead to some relief, this hope is easily shattered with bishop d5. After that, there is no way out. Yeah, if black now takes on f5, there is even this funny move g4, attacking the queen, and something like that is a total win for white. Yeah, the attack is just too strong, especially if you consider that all pieces are participating in building up this huge pressure. So g6 was not played. He played not this, but rook c8. Yeah, and after rook c8, I think it's clear what white is doing. f5. This was the idea all along. And now after f5, black is basically not able to keep this pawn on e6 to sort of, yeah, support this whole construction of those two knights. Black now has to take. If you place queen d6, not taking, white has more than one good continuation. One good move, however, is rook e1. Yeah, intensifying this pressure. Yeah, black here really has no good move. Something like this, for example. If we consider this, now white has a ton of threats. It's really amazing. Here. I mean, far too much. Queen d6, for example, rook f5. Yeah, we get in rook e to f5 even, and yeah, it's nothing black can do here. If we just put some more moves on the board, for example. Yeah, and black can resign with a clear conscience. There are many possible lines, but they all lead to a disaster. So what Vidmar did is, after f5, he just took it, and white recaptured with the f pawn, with the f rook. Sorry, the rook. Yeah, queen d6. Yeah, it's not defending, but there was nothing really to defend the position anymore. Rook c7, I could think of maybe trying to do something here, but the pressure is far too high. Something like this, for example. Yeah, even bishop h6 is a possibility. Yeah, attacking the king directly. This is just one possible line, and note that here everything hangs. f7 hangs, and black is defenseless. Yeah, it is too much pressure. If all pieces are attacking, it's usually too much. Yeah, well, Vidmar played queen d6, and now there is a pretty simple tactical sequence to win the game. Botvinnik now took on f7. Rook takes. Yeah, if the king takes, it looks quite precarious, right? Yeah, there's actually more than one way to win, but this is the simplest. Removing the defender of the d5 knight, and after something like that, we will have a disastrous discovered check. Just one way to win. There's many. Yeah, he went with not with the king, but he went with the rook capture, and now white took on f6. Bishop takes, rook takes, and now we see an additional problem. Whoops, this is hanging as well. Black went to cover that. Yeah, and here Botvinnik is doing the final improvement. Rook attacking the queen with a tempo. Well, queen takes. Is a very easy win. So instead, queen e8 was played, and now rook d7 led to resignation. So here Vidmar resigned the game. Yeah, this is one of the all-time IQP classics. Yeah, showing one way to attack with the isolated queen pawn. I mean, more than one way, but it shows one particular attacking device very clearly: the f pawn advance. Using this pawn in order to get your rook into the game, and removing this with f4, f5, this defense of the d5 blockading square, where you ultimately lift the blockade and break through on this diagonal. Yeah, this also shows that the attacking potential of the isolated queen pawn is very much, yeah, it's very strong, especially if black has chosen a relatively passive setup, like it happened in this game. Nowadays, very often people tend to try to attack the IQP more than to blockade it. Here we see a situation on the board where the pawn on d4 is blockaded by the knight. That's all nice, but well, the d pawn is supposed to be weakness, but black is never going to take it when there's a knight on d5, and white basically plays around all that and builds up this huge pressure on the king side to ultimately launch a winning mating attack. So it's really something that people should appreciate, that they shouldn't be afraid of the isolated queen pawn, and they should try to add some lines to the opening repertoire to get these kind of positions on the board. It's really something that you need to be able to play as a good chess player, because they pop up time and time and again, and IQP positions very often are promising because you have such good piece play. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video showing one of the classic Botvinnik games. It also shows, by the way, one of Botvinnik's absolute strength. If he got to a position type that he knew and he had studied before, which is definitely the case for this Queen's Gambit IQP positions, in positions that he knew, where he had some sort of knowledge advantage on the opponent, there he was absolutely deadly. I mean, he really played those kind of games then, where every move sort of looks like the best one. Probably he managed to play on every move the best move here. Yeah, it was all a natural flow. There was no tempo given or time lost or whatever. It was just like a perfect punishment of black's somewhat passive and imprecise opening play. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching.